Hello and welcome to Mindful Moment Crochet. Today we are going to be doing a beginner-friendly tutorial all about swatches. Now, you may have seen where different patterns will call for swatches. Maybe you're just trying to figure out how to make your first sweater or first cardigan, or maybe it's something as simple as you want to make a blanket, but you want to make sure that your blanket is the right size. So, when you get your yarn, you want to just kind of start with the back here where it will tell you what size hook to use. And then right here, it gives you an example of a 4x4 inch swatch, which is usually what we'll start with. Is going to require 18S and 24R. So 18 stitches and 24 rows to get an approximate 4x4 square. Now, that's great. And I think it's super helpful. But to measure it, we actually don't want to just make a 4x4 square, which is kind of where the nuance comes in a little bit. Whenever we think about making something that is bigger than 4x4, so a sweater, a blanket, maybe even a washcloth if you're looking for a particular size, what happens is our middle stitches become the most important stitches because those are going to be the ones that replicate over and over and over again throughout that project. So if we measure including the outside of our square, it may not be the same. We might be a little bit tighter on the edge, we might be a little bit looser. Those turning chains that we may or may not be using in our project may or may not be there to either help with our gauge or hurt our gauge. So we want to make sure that we make bigger than a 4x4 square. Now, you may have figured this out by now. You can use a ruler, and that is totally fine. Sometimes, not on this one, there will actually be a ruler on the inside of the band. So you may not even have to buy anything in order to measure your swatch. So just keep that in mind. If you take the band off, sometimes there's that ruler. If not, you'll probably need a small ruler, or you can invest in one of these, which is a swatch ruler and needle gauge. So, what we have here, let's see. Now, if I were going to be knitting, I could use this gauge to help me figure out what size my my needles are. If I'm trying to measure what size my hook is, and this one's an H, you can see that it will let me know what size I actually have in case maybe it's not marked, or maybe I'm just kind of curious. Whatever your reason, you can just pop it in and see what size it is. And you can see these get considerably bigger, so I know I'm not meeting the mark there. And then this one, it won't even go in. So H is at Goldilocks moment, and it can be super helpful if you ever need to know what size you have. All right, so looking at this on the back of the band here, it says 4x4, which is inches, and then it says 10 by 10 centimeters. Now, 10 by 10 centimeters is not actually 4x4 inches. It is slightly smaller. So you can see here for my swatch, if I were going to put this down on top of a fabric, the 4-inch comes right to the edge of this square. The 10 by 10 centimeters has just a little bit extra that it has to make up for. So just know that if you are outside of the US, you may need to make sure that you gauge appropriately for your measurements and what you're trying to achieve. So just keep that in mind. So let's practice making a gauge swatch. For most things, as a starting point, we're going to want to start with whatever the back of the band says, and then we can adjust up and down. Now, if you have a pattern that you're working off of course you can start wherever it tells you to in terms of maybe size down a hook, size up a hook. You might even change hook sizes during the course of your project. It's really just kind of up to whatever the designer says at that point. But then we all have our individual tension, and so that's really going to play a big role in how many chains we need, exactly what our project is going to end up looking like, is going to have a lot to do with us. So I'm going to just kind of pick a number here. Make sure that I have enough. I'm aiming for about a 5 by 5, just because I can, I guess. Cool. Alright, I think I will add a couple of those back. I'm also going to need one to switch. Now for the sake of this, I also want to go into the back bumps, again, because I can. And I'm just going to do single crochets across. You do not have to go into the back bumps of yours. I like to go into the back bumps because I think it provides kind of a little bit of a stretchier edge, which gives me a little bit more maybe of an accurate gauge. Or maybe that's all in my head. I definitely have not seen anybody else try to go into the back bumps of their gauge swatch. So it's really up to you. So we just want to go back across and single crochet into our chain. And I can tell right away I am pretty tight in my tension in my chain, tighter than maybe I'm meant to be. So we'll just go back across. Now, if you're anything like me, now is a good time just to take a deep breath. I think for most people doing the row back across the chain is probably the least fun. You have to be kind of the most precise and probably the slowest of your entire project. So I'm just going to make sure I sit and breathe. Alright, so now my band here says I need 18 stitches, so let's see how many I've kind of guessed at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I happen to guess 18, and you can tell I am way bigger than 4 inches. And I am using the recommended hook for this. So this is why gauge is super important, because it's saying that I should have made a 4-inch gauge swatch, and I have not. Pulling out my blocking boards for just a second. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have almost 6 inches of a gauge swatch. So I have way more than I need. So just keep that in mind too when you're trying to make your gauge swatch, that your individual tension is more important than what the band says, because it's going to be how you make the entire rest of your project. So I'm going to chain 1 and go back across. Now, as I'm working this up, there are a couple things that are important. One thing about crochet is be patient. Give yourself a breather, especially if you've never done it before. If you are trying to make something brand new to you, maybe this is your first time making a sweater, which is why you're trying to learn what gauge swatching is. Maybe you are nervous about starting a cardigan, or maybe you have a request from someone to make them a beautiful full-size blanket, and you want to make sure that you get it the right size. Whatever you're doing, or maybe it's even something special for you, maybe it is that sweater, maybe you just want the coziest blanket that you splurged on some of the best yarn, and you don't want it to be too small when you're done and you get all disappointed. You're allowed to just kind of take a moment. I think a lot of times we see people who can crochet the best or the fastest or whatever. And sometimes, like tonight, I am really vibing on just slowing down, taking some deep breaths. It is currently, I'm going to also probably post this tomorrow, so it is currently January 20th, 2025. So it is snowing outside here in North Carolina. I think the low the next couple nights are in the single digits where we live. And we're also getting a new president tomorrow, which I'm sure comes with a lot of emotions. And I think it's just nice to slow down, take some breaths, remember that you're allowed to take care of yourself. You're allowed to just enjoy a craft because you like the craft, or because it gives you a couple minutes to yourself at night. Or maybe it's your time that your brain shuts off for a second and you just get to kind of zone and enjoy. I think that's why I like things like gauge swatches, particularly the one I'm doing right now, where it's just single crochet, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I don't have to count. I don't really have to focus. It's just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Alright, and as I come up to the end of this row, I think one thing is becoming evident, and that is kind of that reinforcement for why it's important to do a gauge swatch that is bigger than 4x4. And that is because my tension has changed. So to me, again, that like crochet in general is a very mindful activity, and I can start off very tense and stressed and kind of end a little bit more relaxed, and that's exactly what's happening here. When I started, you can see I haven't added any stitches whatsoever, but my swatch is wanting to rainbow just a little bit, which basically means that my tension here, either on the chain or the first row, is tighter compared to the rest of my stitches. So when I measure, I can still use it, because I want to measure maybe starting, a row or two in and making sure that I don't get those corners, so that I get a true gauge swatch, because this is much better than getting all of this that maybe is a little bit wonky. So again, if you find that when you first sit down, you're really tense, maybe you've had a long day and you're just ready to hang out, take some deep breaths, relax. It's okay to remember you need to take a couple rows before you get settled into your crochet. I think that's where things like temperature blankets can be really helpful. Do your row on that first and then start working on the project that has a size accompanied with it. Maybe it's, if any of you watch TL Yarn Crafts on YouTube, which she has a lovely channel and I think she's also a lovely human. You can even do your mood blanket for the day. What was your mood like? So that's her 2025 project. And I think it's just kind of a nice way to have something to do at the end of the day that shouldn't take too long, or hopefully it doesn't take too long. If you're also trying to work on other things that mean a lot to you, or maybe that's your time. That is your time to slow down. Let it take as long as you need it to. Zone out, zen out. So this is also just the magic of gauge swatches. Give yourself time. We're just back and forth. I also find it a lot of fun to do things like this, just kind of crochet and chat. And so maybe I'll incorporate that a little bit more too, because I started crocheting when I was in graduate school, and a lot of it was because I had a roommate in undergrad that, I guess wasn't a roommate, she lived next door, but in the same dorm. And she crocheted, and I was always kind of just amazed in watching her hands go back and forth and back and forth. And I wanted to learn. So I eventually did. And it was nice while it lasted. And I kind of forgot for a while. And I got my first job. Kind of started settling into things. And I was like, you know what? Crochet would be really fun again. And now I've been crocheting for a couple years much more consistently. And I also noticed that as we went from a more city, suburban area out to a more rural area, the pace of life is just very different out here. I'm not going to go run to Target. It's not 5 minutes down the road anymore. The closest Target I think is over an hour away. Even the closest Walmart I think is close to 30 minutes away. And so I think there is something to be said about just slowing down, taking a breath, finding the life pace that you enjoy. I think that means a lot. And now that I've been doing this for a while, I can officially say that I understand why people say that crochet can be a really mindful activity. Whether you're counting, whether you're just kind of fidgeting with your hands, watching TV, whatever it is. I think it's a really cool way to wind down. And if nothing else, I think it keeps us off of different social media for a minute. And sometimes I think we can use a break from the noise, from the hustle. There's a lot going on in the world that I think can feel very overwhelming to people. And I think crochet can be one of the many ways that we fight back. It's slow fashion if you're making a sweater or a scarf or a beach pullover. It's kind of cool. You can make a whole fabric from a string, and you did that. Just a thought. So something you might be noticing is that it does take a little bit of time to get these done. Which is why this might be the thing you reach to when you're trying to get ready to work on your project. Maybe you just need a couple minutes to wind down before you get into it. You can also block these. If you're using them for a pattern, the pattern should tell you if you need to block it first. I would say most of them you're going to want to block it first. I would still measure without blocking it, so you have an idea. But if your fabric then grows exponentially when you block it, you may not want to block it as aggressively. You know, you might want to make a couple of adjustments before you go too far in your project, so that you end up with the right fabric drape and all that fun stuff. On a get to know me note, one of the things that we have been really excited for is to get a new dog in our life, and we finally agreed on a breed, and we're very excited to welcome hopefully a dog that also becomes a therapy dog for us, and what that would mean maybe for some future opportunities, but in terms of giving back to the community, or just having a dog that is more of a working dog in that regard. So very excited to see where the future takes us on that one. If you are a dog lover, if you're a cat lover, if you're a hamster or snake lover, put it in the comments below. And if you have one at home, I would love to know their names or breeds or types or whatever else. I think it's fun how much pets mean to us. We're definitely dog people in this house. Another thing that's kind of fun is finding fun new places to buy yarn. And we went to a fun yarn store out in Cary, North Carolina. It's called Warm and Fuzzy, and they had one of the most beautiful selections of yarn I've seen in a very long time. And the kind human that worked there was just sweet as she could be. Told us about a cool fiber festival that's coming up, I believe in March. So lots of cool things to check out in the world. I will highly recommend going out, finding your local yarn shops, talking to people, seeing what classes they offer. See if you can start a club or get to know somebody. I think having conversations with people is something that is missed nowadays. if you are in the fiber community, wherever you live, if there are fun fiber festivals or fun yarn shops, would also love for those to get dropped in the comments. I am always down to go explore new places, new fun things. Alright, so we are, I think that is close enough. Let's see if we can measure this. Oh, nope, I think I need 2 more rows. We're very, very close. Alright. Hopefully that should be good enough. Now, to count gauge, we're going to put our gauge over it, or I'm going to use my gauge, but I guess it's called a Swatch ruler. But you could, of course, just measure 4x4 and kind of see where it ends up. I also like to align mine with a stitch and with a row, so I kind of square it off. Alright, so for this one I'm getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and for rows, let's see, I'm getting, kind of hard to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and almost like a half down here. Now, if you're curious on how to count rows, because the way the fabric looks is it looks like a row goes from here to here, but that's actually 2 rows. So you can see one row is going to have these little back bumps, little back bumps right here all the way across, but then when you flip it over to this side, you're going to get those same back bumps right here on a different row. So my back bumps are here on this row, which is right where that divot is on this side. So just make sure that when you're counting rows, you're counting all of your rows. That's super, super important. Obviously, you'll be missing about half your work. So again, I'm gonna line it up with those back bumps so you can maybe see one more time. So we have kind of the top of that stitch before, and then we're going to just simply count it from there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, I think 15 because those are pretty much at the end. So let's think about our work. Now, I'm assuming maybe these are knitting, where they expect this to be a knitting stitch in row count, because I didn't get anywhere close to that. I got 12 across and 16 up. So you can also see the difference there between knitting and crochet, how different those are going to be. Crochet stitches are considerably larger. So when you're doing your gauge swatch, really watch out for what your personal gauge is. Make sure that you make this big enough to where you're counting the inside stitches, not necessarily all this outside stuff, because you're not going to have these turning chains and these gaps over here on the edge. In something like a sweater, you're going to keep going around and around and around and not have necessarily those turning chains in that same way. So I hope you found this helpful. Hopefully it was nice to chat along, and maybe there's a few pieces of information you feel comfortable sharing in the comments. But I hope this helps you get started on your journey to make your very own sweater, cardigan, huge blanket, whatever you want. Hope this helps you kind of see exactly how to make a gauge swatch, how to measure, how to count. Hopefully this was helpful. As always, like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.